All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and I've been going through the PowerPoint presentations for Murachs HTML5 and CSS3 3rd edition for the AWD Application and Web Development 1000 Web Technologies class. We're up to the beginning of Section 3, which is Chapters 15, 16, and 17. In Chapter 15, we get an introduction to JavaScript and Jquery. And you'll notice we have 3 applied objectives and 10 knowledge objectives. Our applied objectives: given an HTML document, use JavaScript to enhance the page so it includes the current date or year or a print button. Given an HTML document, use Jquery to enhance the page so it includes an image rollover, image swap, or slideshow. Use the internet to find JavaScript and Jquery code that you can use for other functions. Those are our 3 applied objectives. Our knowledge objectives: describe how JavaScript works. Describe 3 ways that JavaScript can be used with an HTML document. Describe the DOM or document object model and explain what happens when DOM scripting is used to change the DOM. In general terms, describe how you script the DOM and how you use the $sign in DOM scripting. Describe the way that JavaScript event handlers work with DOM scripting. Describe Jquery and the 2 ways you can include Jquery in a web page. Describe the syntax for calling Jquery methods, including the use of the $sign, the use of selectors, and the use of the dot operator. Describe the syntax for coding a Jquery event handler, including the use of an event method and function. Describe the use of the Jquery ready method. In general terms, describe how you use Jquery for functions like image rollovers, image swaps, and slideshows. Once again, I am in my apartment, and once the heat goes on, I have to pause this because otherwise it gets to be too loud. So, how JavaScript fits into the client-server architecture. JavaScript is what's known as a scripting language. It's not known as a programming language, even though technically it offers everything that a programming language does offer. In addition, JavaScript is what's known as object-based. All right, it's not a true object-oriented programming language. And what I mean by that is JavaScript does offer complete object-oriented programming features, complete features. That said, it does not force you to use any of them. All right, so again, it is object-based, meaning we have object-oriented features which we may or may not choose to use. JavaScript is run by the JavaScript engine of a browser, so the majority of your work is going to be done on the client and not on the server side, although today there are some products that allow you to use JavaScript on the server side. So what do we have? We have the client, so you're sitting in front of your computer, laptop, phone, whatever it happens to be. You bring up a browser window, you type in a URL, you hit enter, that sends a hypertext transfer protocol request to a web server. All right, the web server returns using a hypertext transfer protocol response back to the client. Now here's an example. And if we look at this, what do we have? Well, first of all, notice we've got a script tag here and a script tag here. And what those are doing is they are literally in our HTML, they're calling JavaScript. This is what's called a variable declaration, var today, and the equal new date is the initialization. So this is a variable declaration and initialization. This will literally write right on your screen current date, and then it'll put it on there. This will basically get the full year. So let's take a quick look at this. Let's just grab all the code that's in here. Don't normally do it like this, but I don't see any problem doing it this way. All right, so there's that. Whoops, that's not what we want yet. That's the next chapter. All right, so we have that, and now I'm going to come in and go into here. Heat's about to go on. So I'm going to take everything I did for this form example and I'm going to comment everything that's related to the form example out. Including, and that's literally everything. I'm going to put a new title in here. I commented out all of my CSS that we had up here, and everything that's in here that is for a form, I'm also going to comment out. Now I can already tell my heat's going to go on very, very shortly, so once it does, I'll have to pause. All right, so that's everything. So right now, the only thing that's in my body is the body tag. So let me come in here and paste this in. And again, as mentioned, these are called script tags. Let me tab everything over once. There we go. All right, sorry about that. So I put in some JavaScript here, and I put in some JavaScript here. This JavaScript right here is creating a brand new variable called today and initializing it to the current date, so it should write that right on the screen. All right, so that should write the heading current date, and right after that, it should put that in. Then I'm creating another variable, again with the same name, date, and this should put in the copyright symbol, and this should grab the year. So this should say something like, right here, current date, I'm not sure if it'll say 1-15-2018 or January 15th, 2018 or what. And this will say copyright, and it'll have 2017, comma, San Joaquin Valley Town Hall. So let's check and see if indeed I'm correct. There you go, current date. And so that would be possibly footer information. Who knows? Two types of script elements, source and type, as we move our way through here. The source specifies the location of an external JavaScript file if you have one, and the type is actually in HTML5, this has been omitted, so you can put in type equals text / JavaScript, but you no longer have to. So there's the source, and if you want to use it, we'll look at the type. You can have more than one script on a web page. You already saw that. The elements are executed in the order they appear in the document. If a script is in the head section, if it includes an external file, the JavaScript runs as if it were coded in the script element. If the script element is coded in the body, it's replaced by the output of the JavaScript code. The HTML document must be valid before and after all scripts have been executed. Well, if you remember back in the day when we talked about when we talked about CSS, we talked about 3 different ways of putting in CSS. The first way we talked about was inline. That's kind of what we're doing right here. We're adding it right here. We're adding it into our body itself. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that, but it's not the recommended way of doing it. All right. So what I'm going to try, and we're going to see if this works or not. Let's see. I'm going to try to grab this script that's right here, and I'm going to paste it back into my head section. So I'm going to put that one in there. And again, this may or may not work the way that I'm envisioning that it's going to work. All right, then right below that, we'll put the other one. So we still have our script tags, but this is kind of like when we did the style tags. When we had the style tags up here. when we were doing that for CSS. So we're putting it up here in our head section. This is kind of like internal CSS, but this is internal JavaScript. So let's save that and run it again. We get the same output. Now, I don't have a blind break in there. If I did, we would have had it on separate lines. So notice. So let's just do this. All we'll do, document.write this. So before we put in the copyright stuff, I'm going to put in here a BR tag. And see now if it looks more similar. Okay, I guess I needed 2 BR tags. So now when we go back and we run this, that's what we had. Moved down a little bit on the page, but it's the exact same output. All right. The other way that we can do this, just an FYI for you, just like we did with external JavaScript, I'm going to grab every bit of this, and I'm going to just copy it to the clipboard for right now. All right, and put this in here. Now I'm going to get rid of these script tags. Okay, we can move all these over if we want to. There's really no reason that we have to, but it's not going to hurt anything to do that. Once again, I believe this will run just fine, but typically when you do this, you do it a little bit different than the way I'm showing it to you, but let's just see how it looks, or doesn't look. So there it is. I'm going to save this, and I'm just going to call it script.js. Okay, you can see how the color coding takes over. And now in here, I'm going to remove all of this. This is gone completely. This I don't need anymore. But I do have to come in here and say script source equals script.js. And you need the ending script tag too. All right, so let's see how that works, or if that works. So again, run, and run that under Chrome, and you see that now, okay, that's doing it all 3 ways. That is doing it the first way that we did it, which was putting it in here, right in the actual HTML code itself. That's considered the worst way of doing it, because we're embedding JavaScript right in the body of an HTML document. So that's considered the worst way because, for lack of better words, you're kind of polluting your HTML with JavaScript. They should be segregated from one another, not integrated together. Then we looked at the second way, where we actually put our script tags in here. It's better than the first way, all right, because the script is coded inside of the head section. All right, but the best way of doing it is the way that we just did it, where we put it into an external file. All right, let's jump into next. They start talking in here about the usage of the DOM. And the DOM is something that actually gets built for every web page you create. So if we have this code right here, all right, notice we've got our doc type, our HTML tag, our head tag, so that'll say join email list, our body, which will have an H1 tag that says to join the email list, and a form, all right, with a label for email address and a text box for email address, and then just an ID with an asterisk on it. All right, it's pretty simple, to be honest with you. So again, what we can do is we can come in here and we can grab every bit of this. So I'm grabbing every bit of this code that's in here. I'm going to come back into here and I'm going to make a brand new, okay, this is for an email list. So let's call it what it is. So I'm going to call it email list.html. Okay, so there it is. I can run this right now. Probably won't look like much. There it is. All right, we can blow it up if you can't see it very well. All right. Close a couple of these. When we do that, when we create this, what gets created for us, and this is something that is not visible to you, but something that gets created for us, is this right here, right there. And that's called the DOM, or the Document Object Model. That's the beginning, HTML, which has a head section and a body section. The head section has a title. The title has some text. We've got a body with an H1 that has some text, with a form that has a label, an input, and a span. And the label and the span both have text. What these are considered, each one of these blue boxes, and actually I think the green ones too, is they're considered DOM, Document Object Model, nodes. All right? These things that are right here, everything that you see right there, all that stuff, those are elements. All right? Elements can have attributes. We don't have any in here, but we do have some text. All right? And the text is the text for an element or for an attribute. Texts, notice that they don't have anything after them. These are known as leaf nodes. They cannot have any children. Form has 3 children. Label has a child. Span has a child. Head has a child. Title has a child. Body has 2 children. HTML has 2 children. These title, H1, and form are grandchildren here. You could look at these as being great-grandchildren. Some people go that nuts with it, some don't. All right, the DOM is an internal representation of the HTML elements of a web page. Each element is represented by what's called a node in the DOM. The nodes have a hierarchical structure, and it's based on the way you set the web page up. The DOM starts with the HTML element, and it goes all the way down till there isn't anything else. Within the DOM, you can have several types of nodes, again, including element nodes, text nodes. Okay? JavaScript can be used to modify nodes in the DOM. Whenever a change is made to the DOM, the web browser updates the page in the browser window to affect the change. This means that you can use JavaScript to interactively, while the program is running, change the appearance of the web page. So that's what JavaScript brings to what we've done so far. All right, the stuff we've done so far has been static. We write a web page, not a problem. If we want to add interactivity to it, that's where the JavaScript comes in. Typically, this is referred to as DOM scripting. It's really what makes JavaScript as powerful as it is. What you will notice in just a few minutes is we will use a method called getElementById. This is the thing that you use the most in JavaScript. And it's called a method or a function, but this is why we give IDs to everything on the web page that we may want to even possibly manipulate arithmetically. So these are just 2 of the methods of the document object. The getElementById gets the HTML element represented by the ID that's passed into it in the parentheses. All right, so as mentioned, we will be using the getElementById method a lot. All right, so notice ID for the form, label, we don't have to, anything we might want to manipulate programmatically. So the form, the text box has got an ID, the span has got an ID. All right, so this is the kind of thing we can do. We can say, we can take something that's on a web page and create a local variable based on that. And you're going to see that in just a minute. Now, probably the hardest thing to understand in this chapter is this line of code right here, or it's amongst the hardest to understand. Look at it this way. What we're doing with this is we're making the $, and alias. All right. My name is Jeff Scott. When I was in high school, one of my best friends, Bob, called me Scotty. Probably the only one who ever did call me Scotty. But you can look at it, that was a nickname, but it was sort of an alias for me. And that's kind of what we're doing right here. So what we're saying is, when you use a $, and you put something inside of it, it's as though you typed in document.getElementById and then whatever was in the parentheses. So it's going to be a shortcut for us. We're also going to want to use properties that you use to script or work with the DOM. The value property, which will get or set the value in a text box or something like that, some kind of an input element. First child, which returns the first child node of the element, and node value, which will get or set the text that's been passed in. Now, this is not easy if you've never seen it before. Remember, we're going to have a whole other book that we go through with JavaScript. So the document object is the object that lets you work with the DOM. When you script the DOM, you typically use the $, as opposed to having to type in the document.getElementById. Okay? And these are just some of the properties for scripting the DOM. By no means is that an exhaustive list. So there's an example where we could get the email address. Notice it can be on the right-hand side of an equal sign, or on the left-hand side of an equal sign. All right. Here's a page that has a JavaScript button, so when you click that, it'll print for you. Well, JavaScript is what's referred to as an event handling language. And with an event handling language, you got to kind of look at it this way. That JavaScript is literally sitting there waiting for something to happen, whatever that something is. All right, and when that something happens, it will, hopefully at least, try to react to it. All right, so an event occurs when a page is loaded or when the user performs some kind of an action like clicking on something. The JavaScript code that handles the event is known as an event handler. An event handler can work with the DOM and use any of these methods that we've talked about, plus a lot more. All right, in the example that you see right here, the event handler for the onload event, all right, basically it'll say that whenever you click that button that you want to print the current page. Now here's some examples and here's some code that's associated with it. But I think it'll make more sense. What I'm going to do is on pages 508, 509, 510, and 511, they go through the complete email program, which we've started to do, but on 508 and 509, they go through the HTML, and then on 510 and 511, they go through the JavaScript. Right now, you should be concentrating on getting the overall picture, sometimes kind of called the 30,000-foot view. All right? I would be surprised if most of you would be able to understand the intricacies of this, because there's a lot to it. And again, we will talk about this in much more depth and breadth of coverage as we go on. So we are going to go into, so they're saying, yeah, there's what happens. Okay, so these are the terms that we've talked about. So we're going to build this right now. And they give us the code for the HTML, and then they give us the code for the JavaScript. All right, we'll do that, and that'll get us to the end of the JavaScript portion, and then we'll be ready to start on the portion for doing the Jquery. So let me grab this. Copy it to the clipboard. I'm just going to start up a new file in here, I believe. I've already got an email. I do have an email list already, so let's just replace that like this. And that's only half of it, I believe. So let's check. There's the other half. So let me put this in. All right, and again, even it's fairly complex HTML. So it may or may not all make sense to you. All right. So what I did was, this is supposed to come with an email list CSS file, which I don't have. So I quickly came in and put a little of my own styling in. I floated the labels to the left, gave them a width of 15 ems, aligned the text to the right. And also, after each line, instead of a BR, I put 2 BR tags. And that meant that now it looks like this, which isn't terrific, but it doesn't look bad. All right. So this is the HTML. This is the form that was built using this HTML. Now, as far as what's different in here, we do have a span tag, and that just put those asterisks in here for the email address 1 and the email address 2, and those are signifying that both of those are going to be required, and they will hold a possible error condition. Same thing with the first name. So again, if we looked at this, took a look at this, in essence what it's saying is all 3 of these fields are required. And if you leave them off, or if you put in a bad email address, something that's, etc., you're going to get an error message when you click this button. All right? So that's what we've done so far. So let's go back and look again in here. And now let's look at so it says here the code for the email list. All right, so this is it. And again, as we get done, when we finish, I will explain what all this code means. But it may or may not totally make sense to you right now, and that actually is okay if it does not. Do a little of my own work in here as far as having things line up and look a little nicer than they currently do. All right, so that's part of the code. Then when we go to the next slide here, that's the rest of the code. Again, I am not at all saying, hey, all of this will totally make sense to you, because probably very much of it will not yet make sense to you. But I will go over it in just a moment and show you a little bit of the way that I code. Whether it's a good way or a bad way is, you'll have to start making your own determination on that, but it's just the way I do things. In other words, it's my own little coding standard that you may adhere to or you may not. I typically let students adhere to whatever standard they want, as long as indeed it is a standard. I want you to do things in a standard way. All right, you'll notice that several of these say equal function, and there's no name after the function. This is called an anonymous function. All right, it's anonymous, meaning it's unnamed. This function right here, this one says create an alias. I'm making a comment here for the get element by ID method. That's exactly what we're doing here. This is the join list, and it's got virtually everything in it. This validates the email list entries. So what are we doing here? We're saying we're setting up an email address based on what we put into that text box, another email address based on what is put in the text box. This right here is referred to as a Boolean or true false flag. All right. Here we're saying if the email address is empty, what we want is right now where we have this right here, we want to replace that with an error. If the second email address is empty, we want to take what's there and replace it with an error. if the first name is empty, we want to take what's there and replace that with an error. Now this is going to be very big, so I'm going to cut down the size, and you'll see why in just a minute, okay? All right. I just gave you the overview, but that's pretty much what's going to happen. And this says when you go and you click the button, call this routine, which is right here. So I'm going to save this, and I'm going to save it as email_list.js, because that's what they say to call it in the book. Email_list.js. Okay, so now let's come back to here, run this. There, oops, ran the wrong file, I'm sorry. We should be able to just refresh here. Now click the button. Notice I get my messages. This field is required. I don't know if it's checking it. I don't think it is. If I just say hello, hello, Jeff. Okay. It's trying to call the join.html file, which I haven't written, but that's okay. It worked. Now, typically we would check this to make sure that indeed that was a valid email address, and so is that. Notice if I do put in hello@goodbye.com, and I put it in here again, and I click the button, notice what we have. It gives the email address, hello@goodbye.com, the second email address at hellogoodbye.com, and the first name of Jeff. So what you've seen in here is a very, very, very simple little program that has come in, and we have used, created an HTML to do this. Again, I don't have the coloring that you see in there because I don't have all that stuff. I didn't make my own CSS file, and I didn't bring the one in. We put in our HTML to build this. Then we put in our, and notice here it says this entry must equal the first entry. I didn't check that, so let's look at it. Let's go back. This is our email list. Let's run it again. Yep, this entry must equal the first entry. And boom, now it worked. All right. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop right now, because the next part of the chapter, I'm about halfway through the chapter right now, but the next part of the chapter goes in a different direction. So we've learned a little bit about beginning JavaScript. Now we're going to learn a little bit about beginning Jquery, and I'll be back with that very shortly.